Hi, everyone. Welcome back to AI Chronicles. Today, the topic of this conversation is about AI governance. Big words. So, I don't know much about it. So, that's why I have Anna over here who has amazing experience, but I will let her introduce herself so it is better justified coming from her. Hi, Anna.
Oh, thank you. Hi, how's it going? Thank you for inviting me to this. I have 3 decades of experience in AI architecture and system development, as well as being a fractional chief product officer. I've been working as an AI architect, helping companies adopt sustainably AI governance, including a company that I'm currently working with called Gathered in Australia, who is a digital twin IAM.
Nice. Wow. 3 decades of experience. That's a lot. You must have stories, I bet.
Just a bit.
Before we get started, and because I am very curious about this AI governance space, but before we get started, I'd love to know what are you doing for Super Bowl? Are you going to watch the game?
I'm gonna watch the commercials because I think that's more important. I'm more like, worried about the commerce and where we're going with that, so the game is just a, side note.
Nice.
What about you?
Nice. I'm gonna go to the coffee shop and read a book.
Just forget it altogether.
Just forget it. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Cool. I think yeah. So I would love to understand. This particular term, when people say AI governance, I think it gets thrown around a lot right now. So, when you strip away the buzzwords, what does good AI governance actually look like in practice inside an organization?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great question these days, and it's gonna be very pertinent for 2026. Most people think AI governance is about policy, review boards, and some kind of approval checklist. And but once you start doing things like co-piloting and agentic systems, that's no longer going to allow for operational authority. And that is where AI governance is coming in play in 2026, is where that authority will be ahead of time versus looking at governance after systems have acted. So your questions into your company, you're going to want to ask basically 5 main questions. So what are the systems acting on right now? What is it allowed to take? What data and tools can it touch and under what constraints? And how quickly can we stop it if something changes? So if you can answer those questions deterministically, you've got governance. But if you can't, you don't, regardless of how many policies exist. So right now, just to summarize that, the shift is happening because AI systems are crossing that threshold from advisory to operational.
Hmm. That makes sense. And from what you have seen, where do companies usually get AI governance wrong early on? You mentioned that like there are some questions around, what agents or co-pilots or even in the internal AI tools or any kind of tools, they should know like what's allowed, what's not allowed. So I'm just curious, like what do these companies get wrong early on, especially with, these AI is moving at a warp speed. So just curious, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't think teams are getting governance wrong because they're reckless. I think they're getting it wrong because they're trying to use the old playbook into the new settings. So
Mm.
it's moving fast using the wrong abstractions. You still want to move fast, but you're assuming governance failures will look like model failures. But in reality, that looks like authority failures. So basically, early on, teams optimize for speed for by reusing service accounts, over provisioning tools, writing agents directly into production systems, and basically promising that they'll tighten it later.
Uh-huh.
But I think that's where we're getting things a little wrong. So right now, we're using a lot of the traditional access controls, like the role-based access control assumes stable roles and predictable actors, humans in the loop, but agents violate those assumptions and roles become kind of like permission dumpsters. So basically, attribute-based access control can help improve that context. So You're still struggling in express intent, time bounds, and delegation chains, but that's why teams think they have governance. So with based access control, you can see, is this action allowed right now for this purpose under these constraints? So that policy needs to be enforced by execution points around like tool calls, data
Mhm.
access, credential minting, outbound communication. So basic, it lets you in cold loops like this agent can read but not write, or this workflow can call this API only in this box without hard coding like rules. So the problem is that like if you have a ghost or informal authority that exists, you're going to have permissions that spread across systems that you don't know which agent needs what and if you've revoked those systems. So companies get governance wrong early by governing people instead of authority and by assuming ephemerality equals safety, but it doesn't.
Wow. Do you like what happens if when they don't fully understand the root cause of all of this, especially like you mentioned that governance is more on the authority side and less to be considered like as a model failure.
It'll actually slow teams down because basically you're giving unclear permissions to agentic systems that will possibly break, and then you're going to have to do some slow rollbacks. So we're seeing in 2025, 70% of all of the it's not so much the malware, it's the identity issues that companies have. So we want to
Mm.
stop that before it happens, because once it happens afterwards, that revocation risk can pretty much break down your trust to your customer. You're going to lose your customer trust, and then trying to get that back affects your bottom line into, um, basically how much money you're making, um, and then sorry.
Lots of thoughts.
Yes, lots of thoughts. We're gonna remove that. So organizations that rely on post hoc reviews consistently experience slower incident response time, larger blast radii, and authority that's poorly unused. So this shows up repeatedly in agent security postmortem. So talking about that, you're going to lose customers, you're going to lose any access to your growth and
Mm-hmm.
going to market. And
Yeah.
so I think this is also where identity egress is going to start mattering. And I
Huh.
think people are going to have to start looking into that more. So identity egress is what authority crosses a boundary first. So
Gotcha.
making actions possible even without data leakage. So safe experimentation, preventing identity egress by design is going to probably be the future that tech workers are going to be working on, especially CISOs and governance. It's going to be like, is this safe?
Mm.
And what is the
Mhm.
system incapable of doing? Not so much what it can do, but also what it can't do.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And speaking of like the tension and everything, you mentioned speed and other stuff, other security stuff. So I understand that there's often tension between when it comes to innovation, speed, and guardrails. So how do you think teams can design governance that enables experimentation instead of slowing it down completely?
Yeah, definitely. I think this can be enforced with workload identity and short-lived credentials. So, for example, you can do sandbox environments with limited authority or restricted tool sets, no external egresses, or looking or basically synthetic or redacted data. So, when you enforce those, then teams don't need those approvals, which can slow things
Mhm.
down, or security doesn't block that progress of innovation or governance becoming invisible. You're actually seeing what you're constrained so that you can build into these defaults. So you don't have to worry about it as you're doing innovation. So basically, governance enables speed when it defines impossibility. So trust is not a control, boundaries are.
Fair point. I like that sandbox idea. That generally gives a kickstart or a head start rather. And uh, as you already know, AI systems they are becoming more and more autonomous and long running, especially with this AI agents. It's crazy. Now, how does governance need to evolve compared to the older model review plus checklist approach?
Definitely. So I think governance will no longer be able to be traced on what happened because that's going to become unreliable because of ephemeral systems and ghost and that. So you're going to have real systems executing not in a chain, but in a graph. So you're
Hmm.
going to have out, you're going to have retries, you're going to have background jobs, you're going to have parallel actions. And most organizations won't be able to full execution path access distributed systems in real time.
Hmm.
So I think that complexity is going to require you to more forensic execution to possibility in that control. So you're going to look at observability,
Hmm.
look at identity controls or identity egress controls, and then you're going to possibly use a digital twin of authority.
Hmm.
It's a live model of who can act, what they can touch, where authority can flow, and where revocation points exist. So that's not
Gotcha.
it's modeling permission space.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. And just one last question before we wrap up. I'm always curious about, what's ahead. So, what is one governance capability organizations should start building now that they'll absolutely need in the next couple of years, but most organizations are not even thinking about it yet?
I think that authority control plane that we've been talking about for autonomous
Mm.
systems, I think it's no more reviews, it's no more policy documents. You're going to have to answer in real time, how many machine principles exist, which ones are active, what authority they hold, and how fast it can be revoked. So basically, in 2 years, you're going to see a control plane that must manage the identity egress and the data egress together. It's authority that is constrained by data risk collapses. Start investigating into things like SPIFFY or X509 if you're really technical. But as leaders, you can also look at the inventory of your machine identities, identify irreversible actions, require revocation plans, and treat authority like production reliability. So technically, that looks like identify your workload identity, short lived credentials, the PBAC, policy based enforcement, egress controls. I keep saying egress all the time. I really believe in this. I want everybody to look into it. Observability is going to be
Hmm.
key. Um, and that leverage of that observability will show you your authority drift, will you show your accumulation, your risky combinations, and that won't be just as a dashboard, but that'll be in real time. So as systems become more that autonomous authority, that valuable data can help with that governance that you can't see normally. So
Hmm.
I think finally, I think you're going to have autonomous systems. You will not always know exactly what happened, but you must always know what was allowed to happen and what
Hmm.
was not allowed to happen and how fast you could stop it. And then that governance capability organizations will need next. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, yeah, it definitely makes sense, and I get it. I can you expand a little bit, or just like help me understand what you mean by revocation plans?
So when something does happen or when you are in a sandbox, how do you remove that authority in real time? So sub 100 milliseconds.
Hmm.
So you want to be able to identify what is possible,
Okay.
like with a digital twin or something, like that uses digital twins to identify before an agent actually takes an action. So if you have a revocation of that authority beforehand, first,
Mm,
you're going to get ahead of it and
yeah,
faster.
right. Got it. Got it. I just thought about like one more question, which I think I should have started with started the conversation with it. How does one get into AI governance if they want to do, I don't know, like research or in fact bring in that aspect into their company? How does one get started for that?
I think that's a good question, and I think AI is moving so fast these days that is very lucky that you and I are both in the Bay Area, so we can go to
Mhm.
these meetups. We can see how system architects are looking how we've done things previously and how that may apply to the autonomous agents in the future.
Mm.
So X509, Web3, SPIFFE, identity security, identity egress, those aren't new terms. They are older terms that people have used previously, but maybe not in across all industries. So I think
Mhm.
getting involved and understanding how those different area, I'm sorry, base access control systems are evolving is
Mm.
something that you can either get into meetups. The Linux Foundation is very good at describing all of these possibilities that are going to be coming out and how they're going to be aligning it with the future of the agent to agent economy in the future. So
Mhm.
I would look in that. Medium, your podcasts. I also write on Substack. If you guys want to look at unified AI governance backbones, I write about it about once a week. Happy to have any discussions about that. But it's not so much in books. It's going to be about getting ahead of it.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I think sometimes I feel like even the people have good intentions, they're just probably not aware of where to get started from. So I think this is pretty good. And yeah, thank you so much, Anna, for your insights. This was a very thoughtful perspective on AI governance and what it means as these systems become part of everyday work. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And feel free to subscribe to my channel to hear more of these insightful conversations. And I will make sure to link Anna's Substack page so that you can learn more about AI governance. Thank you for your time, Anna.